Long live Mexico! Long live Mexico!
¡Viva México!
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's start with the broadcast, the first broadcast of the day. And well, a series of reactions from the public, from people who applaud and thank the Mexican soldiers for fighting organized crime and also for repairing the open ditches left by organized crime. In these blockades they've been making, with shouts of Viva Mexico, applause and thanks. Well, these are some of the reactions that have been appearing on social media. Well, obviously a tremendous topic. Let's move on to information about what's happening in the world, several interesting matters, and various reactions to what's going on in this situation. The ovation that was also given to Marco Rubio yesterday during this State of the Union address. This is the moment. Let's see if we can listen to it. Let's take a look at Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. Thank you. And it's probably because Marco Rubio is not only one of the most relevant figures that President Trump has had, but possibly one of those who has operated the best, one of those who has best been able to adapt the strategies he wants. Trump is an experienced politician, a real politician, and he has brought a bit of balance to the chaos that Trump has in many areas. Obviously, this recognition should be deserved, at least from Trump's strategic point of view. Obviously, now there will be people who agree or disagree, that's another matter, but at least from the point of view of the strategy that Trump has wanted to pursue. Well, it's clear that he is by far the most relevant figure he has had so far. Other than that, well, there are some doubts now because not even Mike Johnson, not even the Vice President, no, not the Vice President, the Secretary of Commerce, has also had some important shortcomings there. Another thing that also, well, stands out from these moments that happened yesterday during the State of the Union address, it's this moment that's quite well curious and very much in Trump's style. Let's listen to it.
Nobody stands up. These people are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy.
Obviously, only the Republicans applauded. Who is he referring to? Well, Trump is saying these people are crazy, and that's all he said about the Democrats. He said these people are crazy. And well, that's also part of the style, you know, not Trumpian, but look at what's happening in other areas, right? And we're going back to what the United States is. But it's striking that there are significant developments happening regarding Ukraine, and there are some pretty interesting things going on between China and Russia. We're going to talk about that situation in a moment, but let me tell you the following. The casualties and abandonments, the departures, not desertions, that are happening in the Russian army have skyrocketed. They're saying that a restructuring of this conflict is being forced. In the middle of the war, there's already a disaster, exhaustion. Yesterday, protests against the war could be seen in 40 cities against the war over there in Russia, 40 different cities according to current reports. In the estimate of the losses that Russia has had in these 4 years of war, it's 1.2 million soldiers between those killed and wounded, and obviously that's also more or less the calculation they make. Approximately towards Ukraine. The war between Russia and Ukraine is in a new critical phase. Most professional Russian soldiers involved in the initial invasion are already gone. Well, let's say in their positions that there is no longer a trained reserve ready for a conflict. The accumulated casualties, approximately between personnel and fatalities, are estimated at 1,250 personnel, including both the dead and wounded. It is estimated that out of these, 325,000 would be Russians who have died, and the rest are wounded and others. The figures obviously also vary greatly depending on whether they come from Ukraine, Russia, or from other institutes in other countries that also keep their own records. The military leadership headed by Vladimir Putin would be tolerating very high casualties in this conflict. In response to this, there was a very striking comment yesterday, a reaction that suggests Russia might be considering using nuclear weapons. We're going to talk about that situation in a moment. Obviously, it's intense. But aside from this, what would have had the biggest impact is the economic issue. We're going to talk right now about what strategy they're carrying out and why they're considering launching atomic weapons. What is China's reaction to all these kinds of things right now? To these details? First of all, there are two things that are concerning right now, which is when Russia wants to do something, they start selling you a story. First, they start giving you context about things. Something is happening, so I have to react this way. Hey, let's see what you want to do. I want to invade Ukraine. I want all the territory. What can I sell them? Say that there are some Nazis, but you also have Nazis inside. There are Nazis in Russia too. Well, no, that doesn't matter. Just say that there are Nazis and whatever else and that they're attacking Russian speakers. And with that, a story is sold. They start selling you the story for a while until later they say, well, I have to invade. There's no other way. Now they're starting to sell the story in which London, England, the United Kingdom, and France would be wanting to send atomic weapons to Ukraine. What does this mean? Why are they selling you this story? Well, so they can use atomic weapons and say, well, it's because they wanted to put atomic weapons there and I had to send some atomic weapons to Ukraine. That's the idea. Now, in response to this, the Chinese have put a stop to it. Look, who came out and said, wait, this can't go on, it can't go in that direction. And China says, hold on a second, it's not like that. Hold on, I also have intelligence. I also have analysis in France and in the United Kingdom, and there's no indication, says China, there's no indication that atomic weapons are being sent. That's what his partner, friend, and neighbor says. Beijing responds to the rumors coming from Russia and reaffirms its stance against the use of nuclear weapons. Simply put, that's a red line for China, it says. Nuclear weapons can't be used in a war. They don't want to have a nuclear war in a country that's very close to China. If we include Russia, it's certainly a neighbor. China has officially responded to the accusations and rumors spread by Russia about an alleged transfer of nuclear weapons to Ukraine by France and Great Britain. The rumor arose in Russian media and political circles where this was insinuated to China. Beijing made its position very clear and said there is no information that can confirm such intentions on the part of Paris and London. On this matter specifically, it puts a stop to it and says, look, no, don't get it wrong, don't go down that path. In other words, China is not putting a stop to the war, it's putting a stop to nuclear war. That's the part China is saying that's not allowed, that's something that can't be touched. It's extremely important that this was done because if you let it go on, pretty soon they'll be launching nuclear weapons at Ukraine. This won't stop them, but it might make them think twice. Another issue is what's happening inside Israel. Something strange is going on there. Let's get to that. There are movements today that draw attention toward Israel, and those are movements from the United States. What's happening in Israel? Why does this smell more and more like war? The United States is deploying even more weapons, this time toward Israel. 22 F-22 stealth fighters have been stationed at Israeli bases as tensions with Iran are rising. The United States is deploying and there are about 150 weapons around. Planes are stationed around the Middle East and a small part of Europe near Turkey, and this whole area is aimed toward the Middle East. Now, this movement is being announced an additional force that had landed at the base in southern Israel as part of an unprecedented military buildup in the region. At least in the past 20 years, though, I think this will surpass it. Even that invasion of Iraq in 2003, never since that time had so many United States troops, so much force, been seen in the Middle East. According to reports, this would be the largest concentration in the region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The deployment? Meanwhile, right now negotiations are supposedly taking place with Iran. By the way, tomorrow there are two important things. Tomorrow, the 26th, Thursday, February 26th, the meeting in Switzerland at the Embassy of Oman between the United States and Israel. Between the United States and Iran, they're not going to meet face to face. It's an indirect meeting, but still right there in the same area. And another is the hearing that the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton, are going to have. They will be in Congress for a hearing, unfortunately behind closed doors. But, well, I hope that somehow it gets leaked what was said there, so that's going to be an interesting topic. But anyway, the President of the United States is warning that the talks are on the verge of failure. And in that case, if they do fail, then a military attack, a military move will be ordered. Caroline Lewitt herself stated that the first option will be diplomacy, but she confirms that the use of lethal force is already being considered if necessary. Israeli officials. One thing is what is said in the American media, and it's very different from what is said in the Israeli media. There we see how, in the end, they try to sell one story or another depending on the region. In the United States, they really push this idea of, well, it's going to be diplomatic, but the last option is the military one. And in Israel, what I see in the Israeli media is that they are preparing for a conflict. Basically, there is a last chance for moderation, but it's basically the story in reverse. In the United States, it's like, well, the last option would be a conflict. And here, well, I mean, some media outlets, some media are talking about what's happening in terms of military movement. But many have this idea of giving it more of a diplomatic focus, maybe more out of a desire for there not to be a war, which I think nobody wants. But at the same time, they're kind of avoiding the reality of saying, well, this huge military deployment, the biggest in 20 years or more than 20 years, it's not going to happen just because, right? I mean, this has to be, or is, I mean, most likely it's not just a reaction or a response to a broad and long attack. And that would be very unfortunate, obviously, because of the losses it could cause. And by losses, I also mean civilian losses, which could also be significant. But the other possibility, and the most likely one, is that it's a quick, very precise attack on certain specific places, and then they pull back. Just as a demonstration, basically of force, but it wouldn't end the regime or the nuclear program or anything like that. So that's the big dilemma, right? And from Israel, there's more of an idea being sold that there are movements happening, that they're preparing for something. That's also clear. Chancellor Aragashi did not confirm that an agreement is already within reach. Basically, what the Iranians are telling you is that they already have the agreement. In fact, it's supposed to have been there since last Sunday. No, Monday. The draft is supposed to be ready. It's not clear to me if the United States has read that draft, if they sent it to the United States, to the United Nations, or at least to a man. Did they send it to anyone? I don't know, because they haven't mentioned that detail. What they've said is that the agreement is within reach, that it's already ready, and so on, right? Ali Khamenei himself would have approved the counterproposal to present it in Geneva to the United States and see if they can reach an agreement. The speculation going around the halls of Washington, because remember, there was a meeting with the CIA, military intelligence, the Pentagon, the State Department, and Congress. To explain to them why, because maybe there's a conflict basically, right? I mean, for this to have justification and legality within the United States, they have to justify it and say, well, there's no other option. I mean, everything possible was done diplomatically, and then Congress can say yes or can say no. But within all of this, what they're saying in Washington is that it's going to be a very quick, precise conflict with very clear objectives. Or what's going to happen, because if this drags on, for example, let's suppose there's a reaction. And if Iran's attack causes damage or seriously damages an aircraft carrier or even sinks it, whatever it may be, this won't just stay as it is, and it will become the typical escalation after escalation after escalation, and nothing will de-escalate it, right? So that's probably the most worrying part that's happening right now in this potential conflict, which clearly could happen. Now, if it happens before the World Cup, just imagine what would happen with the World Cup, right? I mean, to begin with, Iran is supposed to play in the United States, which is also a topic that's gotten a lot of attention. There's talk about whether they'll be given visas or not, all that stuff. But the fact that there were... Can you imagine a war, a conflict like that happening at the same time as a World Cup? It would be very strange. Almost always, even in the Ukraine-Russia war, they waited until the Olympic Games were over, for example, in China. And then after that, the war started, right? That's why starting an armed conflict before a World Cup would be very strange, right? Or it's after the World Cup, or it's something very quick and precise right before the World Cup, which also carries other types of risks. Just look at what happened in the last 3 weeks in Europe, with attacks on the Olympic Games, cyber attacks in Germany and other countries that have even affected the trains themselves and have impacted other important areas. So just imagine with the conflict going on, the kind of problems that could cause, right? That. By the way, did Federación Internacional de Fútbol Association react to what was happening in Mexico regarding the issue of insecurity and about what was happening with these movements against the Mexican state, against cartels? And well, the president of Federación Internacional de Fútbol Association says that he trusts everything will be calm by the day of the World Cup. And with that, he gives his support, not just any support, but support of trust in that sense. And that, well, was important because nothing had been said. There hadn't been any reaction, and it was really important for this to happen, right? That's also been mentioned just now. So let's move on to other matters also important. Glasses. Well, I'm sure they're reporting it. Right now, there's a situation with missing records from the files. Einstein, in which would be included the interview of an accuser against the President of the United States, Donald Trump. This is where things get really intense because they thought, or rather wanted, to shut down the whole topic. Einstein even said on behalf of the same prosecutor, well, this is in the past, let's move on to other important topics. And that's it, right? But it's being revealed in United States media that key documents, including statements about accusations against Trump, do not appear in the official publication from the Department of Justice. The controversy surrounding the Jeffrey Einstein files is escalating once again. More than 90 eyewitness interviews, 90 FBI interviews do not appear. An evidence log given to Giselle Maxwell's defense lists around 325 interviews, forms, and so on, but 90 are not on the Department of Justice's public portal. Which ones are missing? Obviously, I think we all know why they're not included in this. There was a 13-year-old at the time who had accused Trump, this was back in the 80s, an accusation, a person who was 13 years old at the time of what happened to her and who directly accuses the President of the United States. That issue is obviously going to escalate. Obviously, the White House says it's fake news and I don't know what. Well, then they should just release the document, right? I mean, why doesn't it disappear? Why isn't the document there? The spokesperson assured that nothing has been deleted, and he explains that the documents that aren't visible could be duplicates and confidential material or part of investigations that are still active, according to what he says. So for now, there is no acknowledgement that anything is missing. We'll have to wait for more details to see if everything will be revealed. That's how these alleged cases from the 80s will be documented, and we'll see if this comes to light, because there are more. Too many times the name of the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, appears. Too many times in those documents, in those emails. And all of this will clearly be an essential part of the entire operation that this person was running. This is to the extent that it's from, if I'm not mistaken. It's the name, the one or two that appears the most. We know it has shown up a lot for decades. So it's a topic that will have to be analyzed, that will have to be investigated, and pressure will have to be put on for their documents to be published, right? It's striking that in Norway, the ex-prime minister, they're even taking their own lives now. Just because their name showed up a few times in those documents. Who knows what he might have done, because clearly this is going to be revealed soon, but it's striking that there are effects happening in other parts of the world. The same ex-Prince Andrew is accused, he's being investigated. Right now, the former United Kingdom ambassador, Madelson, is being investigated, his houses are being searched. Come on, some huge things are coming, right? Meanwhile, another curious thing is happening, but this time look at where... Which group operates in Lebanon? What? It causes a lot of problems in the Middle East. No, we already know who I'm talking about. I'm not saying it's it's a militia, basically a paramilitary group, right? From Lebanon, right? And warned. A few days ago, they said if anything happens with Iran, they'll attack 2 and more. Don't you remember? Good. And it has also been greatly weakened in Fed operations, right? There they have managed to weaken this terrorist group in a very forceful way. But the group is still there, it's still active, and it's still armed. So the question was, what would happen in an armed conflict with Iran? Are they going to operate or not? They had said one thing, now they say the following. How do things change? But they must be seeing something too. This Lebanese group, but that follows the orders of the Ayatollah, announced that it will not intervene, if the United States carries out limited attacks. What does this mean? This is basically the permission they're giving from Iran, nothing more, which the Iranians obviously won't say, but they're giving the permission. Look, attack us little by little. With that, you can already sell the story that you attacked. And here we can say that nothing happened to us, right? And so everyone is happy? That's at least the feeling it gives. And it's not the first time it's been said. Iranian congressmen have already gone on television to imply that it could be something like that, in which there's an agreement where we pretend to hit each other and everyone so that everyone looks good, let's say. Who knows? But meanwhile, a Hezbollah official under condition of anonymity stated to the A, indeed, the French news agency reported that the group will not respond if there are limited bombings within Iranian territory. In other words, they will remain inactive if the attacks are similar to those in June, precision strikes on facilities and nothing more. It's like a group giving permission saying, well, if you operate calmly, I won't react. The group backed by the Iranian government, and the one backed by the government of Iran, and the one backed by HIM, no va a operar en dado caso que fuera algo limitado. Because what they're afraid of right now is what? With the regime to finally put an end once and for all to the Ayatollah. That's why they say it would return. That's the part they don't want. If you let him live, if you let this whole group's operation keep running, then, well, we won't do anything. With the Game of Thrones, right? Basically, they're the real-life Game of Thrones, where it's all just strategic moves to survive, and that's basically it. I mean, you sacrifice a little just to keep going, because the next step is the possible disappearance of that kind of regime. That's how things are, right? It's also a pretty curious topic, isn't it? Are you taking notes? Weren't those their records that were pointing? Where could the conflict be heading? By the way, this moment with the Pakistanis continues. The artillery unit of the Pakistan Army is currently conducting tests with these multiple rocket launch system units. If we can see here which ones they are permitted, there are the launchers. I'm sure they'll report. The Pakistanis have been showing strength this time. Let's see. There they are watching, using rockets from
122 milímetros. Esto en el campo de unidad, en las pruebas de campo de unidad.
It's not, no, it's not, it's not, it's not that it's not, it's just, no, no, it's not that, it's just, no, no, it's not, it's just not atomic.
Los roces que ha habido en la India esta misma
Exercise sequel. And there were clashes, although the clashes with India were liquid. And there was no mention of any casualties so far from either side right at the border. We showed you the video with audible gunshots. They were shooting at each other, not into the air. But I don't know. I don't know because that part wasn't reported, so we're left with that question. Let's move on to other matters. Let's quickly go to the comments. How have you been, Sebas? Very good. 67, good morning. Greetings to Blanca, Rodrigo, Christy Clans, to the whole community. Thank you so much. Also to Liliana Rivas, greetings. Thank you very much for being a member of the channel. A big hug to all the members. Thank you so much for supporting and for subscribing. And of course, also to the subscribers who help us out by subscribing, liking, and sharing. Hey, we'll be back later. This is the first broadcast about what's happening in the world. We'll talk again in a bit because there are several topics I still have pending that we're preparing right now so we can keep bringing you everything that's happening in the world. There are more topics about what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Cuba, which is also very interesting. We haven't talked much about that for a couple of days.
entre otros asuntos. Nos vemos en un momento más. Hasta pronto.